Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Munnan Bhattacharya. Coming up in the next hour, France votes in the second and final round of polling in its snap parliamentary election. Voter turnout rises sharply from the last time in 2022. Far-right national rally expected to emerge as the strongest force. IAEA DG Emeritus Mohammad Al-Baradei calls India a responsible nuclear power, says IAEA supports India's peaceful use of nuclear energy for decarbonization. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to depart on a two-nation tour of Russia and Austria on Monday. PM Modi and President Putin to hold 22nd annual summit in Moscow. First visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in over 40 years. France witnessed a high voter turnout as the country is voting in the second round of parliamentary elections on Sunday. With the poll fever high, the far-right national rally is looking to make major gains. DD India's Abhishek Bose brings you this report.
It has been a mega Sunday for France as the nation went for the second round of parliamentary election. This time, all the limelight is caught by Marine Le Pen's far-right party, National Rally. The party is bidding for power but likely to fall short of an absolute majority, potentially resulting in a chaotic and hung parliament. From the general populace to the top leaders like President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Gabriel Attal cast their ballot on Sunday. According to French Interior Ministry, voter turnout in the second round of election was significantly higher than the last time in 2022. Many voters expressed concern over the rise of the far right.
I think it's sad for the National Rally to have a majority. Well, I don't understand. I can't analyze it. Why people could vote for the National Rally, I don't know why.
Some voters saw the current trends as an opportunity for democracy.
I think it's a democracy, and if the voters pick a party from the far right or the far left, then that current has to be respected. I think it's an opportunity.
1,000 miles away in New Caledonia, an overseas French territory in the southwestern Pacific, voters queued to cast their votes, hoping the election would bring peace and stability to the territory. There are 577 seats in the National Assembly. For a majority, a party needs 289 seats. Le Pen's party came out on top in the first round of polling on June 30. Meanwhile, left-wing and centrist parties have joined forces in a bid to prevent the National Rally from securing an absolute majority. Recent polls suggest that Le Pen's party may fall short of an absolute majority while still being the largest party. If a hung parliament occurs, it would significantly erode President Emmanuel Macron's influence and lead to an extended period of political deadlock and policy stagnation in the Eurozone's second largest economy. The far-right party's skepticism towards France's engagement with the EU and NATO could also weaken these organizations and impact the global economy. All in all, this election is arguably the most significant in Europe's history in decades, as France navigates this critical political moment. Abhishek Bose for DD India.
DD India correspondent Ross Cullen is joining us now from Paris. Ross, how is the final round of polling coming along, and by when can we expect to know the outcome of these snap parliamentary polls?
Well, let me take you through the turnout figures for now, because we get an indication at 12 p.m. local time. We've just had the 5 p.m. indication, and that shows that turnout at the moment 59%. So it is slightly up on last week, which itself was a record not seen since the 1980s. So we are also seeing very high numbers, projected to be 67% at the final tally at 8 p.m. There's just 25 minutes left for people to vote in some towns and villages, where polling stations do close a bit early at 6 p.m. Here in the big cities like Paris, they're open until 8 p.m. You can see the polling station here behind me. They have actually seen some fewer numbers compared to last Sunday. They're down slightly here, but the overall picture nationally is very much up, with millions of people heading back to the ballots for this decisive runoff vote. We should know the exit poll projected results when the polling stations in big cities like this close at 8 p.m. So shortly after 8 p.m. local time, we should get that first picture of what the results look like.
Right, Ross. Also, we know that so many candidates that were rivaling National Rally candidates have withdrawn from the contest, and we also know that this is not new political maneuvering at the same time. But could the math deplete the numbers of National Rally and work in favour of Macron's Ensemble Alliance or the New Popular Front?
Yes, it's something that we have seen before. Historically, there have been these agreements between rival candidates who might dislike each other, might come from different parties, but they share the greater aim overall of stopping the far right from accessing power. So we have seen this attempt in certain areas. Some 80 candidates from Emmanuel Macron's party and more than 100 from the left-wing coalition have agreed to step down in order not to split the anti-far right vote. However, there's no denying that based on the elections from the first round last weekend and going into this weekend, we do have the National Rally in the premier place. They are certainly polling greatest, and they do stand to win the biggest number of seats if the polls are correct. That would have all sorts of different ramifications. We also know there is the possibility of a hung parliament, the possibility of a national unity government, all sorts of different consequences from the mathematics from this election, because there is just so much up in the air, because there is just so much at stake.
We'll leave it at that. Ross Cullen reporting from Paris. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit Moscow on the 8th and 9th of July, and this will be Indian Prime Minister's first visit to Russia in nearly 5 years. He last visited the country in 2019 when he attended a key economic forum in the Far East city of Vladivostok. His last visit to Moscow was in 2015. Jessica Taneja reports from Moscow.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will pay an official visit to Moscow on the 8th and 9th of July. He will be arriving in Moscow in the afternoon on 8th July. President Putin will host a private dinner for the Prime Minister on the day of arrival.
This visit of Prime Minister to Russia is in the first place resumption of the annual summit between the leaders. Second, there is a very multifaceted relationship between India and Russia. So we expect discussions between the leaders to cover all those aspects, both bilateral issues and dimensions of its relationship, but also the regional and global issues of mutual interest will be discussed.
The next day, Prime Minister's interactions would include an interface with the Indian community in Russia. The Indian community is excited to welcome the Prime Minister in Moscow.
From the India's diaspora, we would like to take our relation on the next level on cultural, the personal relations and everything.
I'm very much looking forward to meeting Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Of course, we have just seen him on the television. So for the first time, we'll be looking at him live in person. And have a very fruitful conversation with him.
I'm really looking forward to our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi's visit to Russia. He's already been here several times, but this time it should be special again for me and for Indians diaspora.
As part of programming elements, Prime Minister will also lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Kremlin. Later, Prime Minister will visit the Rosatom Pavilion at the exhibition venue in Moscow. These engagements will be followed by restricted-level talks between the two leaders, which will then be followed by delegation-level talks led by Prime Minister and the Russian President. The Indian Prime Minister last visited Russia in 2019 for an economic forum in the far eastern Russian port city of Vladivostok. He last travelled to Moscow in 2015. During his last visit to India, Russian President Vladimir Putin had said that Moscow works with New Delhi in the technical and military sphere like no other country. He said Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a time-tested friend. This visit is aimed at reinforcing those ties and also looking at diversifying trade ties beyond the defence and energy sector. This is Jessica Thaneja with video journalist Shubham in Moscow for DD India.
India's ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar, spoke exclusively to DD India's Jessica Thaneja in Moscow. Take a listen.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be in Moscow at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin. Joining us to discuss more on this is India's ambassador to Russia, Vinay Kumar. Thank you, sir, for speaking to DD India.
Welcome.
What can we expect from the visit? It's been 5 years. There's a lot on the agenda. Share to our audiences as to what could be dominating the discussions and what all can we expect.
India and Russia have had the practice tradition of annual summit since the year 2000. This was disrupted. Last annual summit was in 2021 when President Putin visited India. So this visit of Prime Minister to Russia is in the first place resumption of the annual summit between the leaders. Second, there is a very multifaceted relationship between India and Russia. So we expect discussions between the leaders to cover all those aspects, both bilateral issues and dimensions of its relationship, but also the regional and global issues of mutual interest will be discussed between the leaders.
Talks about diversifying trade ties beyond energy and defense sectors. Tell us something about that.
In fact, trade ties have diversified. India-Russia trade in 2021-22 was to the tune of $9-10 billion, which has now gone beyond $60 billion. In fact, last financial year, it was $64.5 billion. So this is diversification of trade so many times. Import from Russia, crude, coking coal, fertilizers, they all have increased in last few years. What we are working on is diversifying exports from India in both in terms of the basket of commodities which we export to Russia and also the volume. So we have two tasks: one, to diversify and expand exports from India, and also take steps and think of ways and means of sustaining this high level of trade which we have recorded in last couple of years.
This visit is being closely watched globally as well. And how significant do you think this visit from the Prime Minister is to Moscow, given the current geopolitical climate?
Leaders will talk about all aspects, all issues, including geopolitical situation and recent developments. But for us, this visit is very important given the deep and important issues that we have in our bilateral relationship. So the focus of the visit is more towards bilateral issues, but certainly I cannot preempt what other issues, and certainly they will talk about many other issues when they meet over various sessions in the course of these 2 days.
Right, and in the 2 days, what all is lined up in terms of the itinerary between the two leaders? tell our viewers as to what are we going to expect the two leaders do in the next 2 days?
We are expecting a warm welcome of the Prime Minister here in Moscow. There would be a private meeting between President Putin and Prime Minister. Then there would be also the wreath laying ceremony that is very traditional in nature, very solemn function. Indian community is looking forward to welcome Prime Minister in their midst after a gap of number of years actually. In fact, this will be Prime Minister's first visit to Moscow after 2015. So there is that enthusiasm in the community to welcome him. And then there is a series of bilateral talks in restricted format, in delegation level format, also exchange of bilateral documents and the events which will take place in Kremlin. So there is quite a busy hours on 8th and 9th of July.
Right, and a lot of diplomatic parley awaits. Thank you, Ambassador, for speaking to DD India and taking our time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So a lot can be expected then from Prime Minister's upcoming visit to Russia. But now going back to our lead story on the French parliamentary polls for analysis on the political churn in France, we are now being joined by two distinguished guests. I'm pleased to introduce Francesca Marino. She is an author and senior journalist who specializes in Europe affairs, and she joins us from Italy. Welcome, Francesca. And Francois Gauthier is joining us. He is a senior French journalist associated with French and Indian dailies. Francois, welcome to you as well. He's joining us from Paris. Francois, I'll begin with you. Macron's snap poll gamble seems to have backfired. Now, where do you see this going? Towards a clear majority for Marine Le Pen's national rally or towards a hung verdict? And what implications could either scenario have?
It looks like a hung parliament because the first trend that are emerging show that Ms. Le Pen coalition party is leading, but with a much thinner margin than expected, so without any majority. So I guess that she may not be even able to form the government because the other parties might have a coalition and she would then be shunted out of power. I would like to say something here because I have watched the coverage in India of these elections, and there is a misunderstanding in India about what's happening. It has been made as if the extreme dangerous right is being countered by the moderate leftist and the Democratic Party, but actually it's much more complicated than that. And I think India can understand that because Mr. Modi and the BJP have been often labeled as extreme right by the French journalists, and I believe some of the French journalists were expelled. So it is not such black and white election. It's much more complicated and much more subtle than that.
Absolutely. India would welcome the right turn in France, including in the whole of Europe, in fact. And like you are saying, there's much more to it than what some people are projecting. But Francesca, we are seeing the resurgence of the far right in Europe. UK is an exception, though, and Francois was referring to that. Why is that trend catching up to your mind?
See, I would agree with what the colleague said. I mean, it's much more complicated than this. We have a rightist government, and we have been having it for the past few years. And despite all the, oh my God, the fascists in power, democracy is still there. We are still in Europe. Nobody is doubting that we will continue to be in Europe. We are a democratic country, and You know, there are reasons why the left is losing ground, both in Italy, in France, and more or less all over Europe. There are reasons. There are reasons. The reasons are, as we said again, complicated. The first one that comes to my mind is that they lost completely touch with what they call the base.
They're out of touch with reality is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly. They live in a bubble. They live in a bubble, in an unhappy bubble, where people cares more for ideal rights than for what they have to put on their table for their kids. And I say it with a great sorrow because I'm a leftist all my life. And I find myself, like many people in Europe, well, to put it mildly, quite puzzled. I think they should ask themselves why this is happening. And this is a question nobody wants to answer or even wants to ask.
The shift towards the right is unmistakable in the whole of Europe as well as in France now, and different people would have different opinions. Some would agree with what is happening, some would disagree with what is happening. But Mr. Francois, what do you make of the decline in Macron's popularity on one hand, and how Marine Le Pen has sought to de-demonize her National Rally Party, in fact, that was known for racism and anti-Semitism on the other? And you wanted to come in as well, so please go ahead.
Well, yeah, you're right, and I agree with Francesca. The two main factors in these elections are, one, the immigration, the unbridled immigration that is happening in all countries in Europe. I think Italy is one of the first hit because its coasts are nearer to some of the Arab and African countries, but France also has a lot of immigration, and the French. And I'm married to an Indian. I'm married to a person of color. So I understand that France is a multicultural nation with people from Africa. A lot of Muslims. I understand that it's a fact that we cannot deny. But the ordinary French, are worried about that because more and more immigration is happening. Also, the Palestine thing has divided France deeply. The Palestine, the attack of the 7th October, this horrible attack that happened on the 7th October from Hamas into Israel, and the fact that many of the French parliamentarians, many of the French white politicians have supported Hamas, even though it was such a terrible, horrible, unforgivable, unspeakable massacre on the 7th October. So that has deeply divided France, and this has given votes to Mrs. Le Pen party. Nevertheless, as usual, in France there is even my friends, my sister, my family, they said, let us go and vote today on Sunday against Le Pen. Let us all rally, so that the extreme right doesn't come to power. But let me tell you, again, and I want to come back to Mr. Modi. Mr. Modi has been accused of, being a murderer, but he never went down in the street and murdered people, Neither did Mrs. Le Pen, Hamas did, Palestine did, and there are terrorists who do. But whatever you can say about Mrs. Le Pen party or Mrs. Meloni in Italy, they never kill people. They might have, mental ideas which are far right, but they don't, they're not murderers. And in India, I have seen some newspapers who said Nazism, the Nazis are going to come back to power to France after Hitler. This is a terrible thing to say, but this is bad journalism. You might disagree with Mrs. Le Pen, but she's not a murderer. But anyway, I think the rally of the democratic leftists, far left parties and rightist parties against Mrs. Le Pen will stop her of coming to power once more.
Yes, and one must also add here that she has been trying to de-demonize her party, especially since 2017. We also saw how she had sacked her own father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who was the founder of the party, for certain comments that he had made. But having said that, Francesca, what could a far-right government really mean for France-EU ties, French ties with EU member states like Germany and Italy, where you are, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, since you observe Europe?
As I agree with him, 7th of October, even in Italy, but I think all over Europe, it's a big problem. And frankly, a personal dilemma also, because in the past it was simple: far right, all the bad, no democracy, anti-Semitic, supporting this and that. Now you see, at least in Italy, all the left supporting Hamas. With Ukraine, the thing was more or less easier, because more or less everybody is supporting the right of Ukraine to defend itself from Putin's aggression. There are small bunches of people, and I must say, there are in the left and in the right supporting Putin. This is a very small percentage, and many of them are just known people in the playbook of Russia. With the 7th of October,
yes,
something really, really puzzling happened, because, you know, supporting Hamas,
yes,
and it made our government officially, even though it's a right government, and somebody still says is a far-right government, which is not, is a parliamentary and right government. They are supporting Israel, but my side, the one who always stood for freedom, supporting Hamas.
No, absolutely. This is an issue that has been inflaming emotions right since the 7th of October. And like we could see from the panel discussion, it would be a very divided National Assembly as well, considering the mix that this election could really throw up when we know the outcome. Well, we'll leave it at that. Francesca as well as Francois, such a pleasure to have you on DD India News Hour tonight.
Thank you. Good evening.
Let's move on now. Nearly 12,000 immigrants from Afghanistan were deported from Iran and Pakistan last week. This, according to media reports, citing the Taliban-led Ministry of Refugees and Repatriation. The ministry said in a newsletter that the immigrants were expelled by the governments of Pakistan and Iran, and that they have since returned to Afghanistan. Those expelled entered Afghanistan between the 3rd and the 6th of July. The US military is set to complete the withdrawal on Sunday of its personnel from Niger's Air Base 101 in the nation's capital, Niamey, and then it will shift its focus to exiting a major drone base in the coming weeks. US Air Forces Major General Kenneth Ekman, who is in Niger to coordinate the departure, said that the US exit from the air base will be finalized with a ceremony on Sunday evening local time. The base is located next to the Diori Hamani International Airport in Niamey. Niger's ruling junta in April ordered the US to withdraw its nearly 1,000 military personnel from the country. Before the coup, Niger had been a key partner in the US fight against insurgents in the Sahel region of Africa, who have killed thousands of people and displaced millions more. Time for another breather on DD India News Hour. Coming up after that, analysis on India's Prime Minister's visit to Russia starting Monday. And India hands over digital equipment to Sri Lanka for smart classrooms in its southern province.
of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour with me, Munmun Bhattacharya. A recap of the headlines. France votes in the second and final round of polling in its snap parliamentary election. Voter turnout rises sharply from the last time in 2022. Far-right national rally expected to emerge as the strongest force. IAEA DG Emeritus Mohammad Al-Baradei calls India a responsible nuclear power, says IAEA supports India's peaceful use of nuclear energy for decarbonization. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi to depart on a two-nation tour of Russia and Austria on Monday. PM Modi and President Putin to hold 22nd annual summit in Moscow. First visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in over 40 years. The Indian Prime Minister will also be travelling to Austria on the 9th and the 10th of July, and this will be the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Austria in 41 years. He will call on Austria's President Alexander van der Bellen and hold talks with the Chancellor of Austria, Karl Nehammer. Prime Minister and Chancellor will also address business leaders from India and Austria. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday termed his upcoming visit to Austria an honour on the occasion of 75 years of diplomatic relations between India and Austria. Thanking Austria's Chancellor Karl Nehammer, Modi took to social media platform X and said, and I quote, "It is indeed an honour to visit Austria to mark this historic occasion. I look forward to our discussions on strengthening the bonds between our nations and exploring new avenues of cooperation. The shared values of democracy, freedom and rule of law form the bedrock upon which we will build an even closer partnership," unquote. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be visiting Austria for 2 days starting the 9th of July. It's in 41 years that an Indian PM is visiting Austria, and its capital Vienna is also home to a number of global bodies such as the International Atomic Energy Agency or the IAEA. DD India's Gautam Roy has spoken with IAEA Director General Emeritus Mohammad Al-Baradei on India's standing as a responsible nuclear power. Listen into this global exclusive.
We have with us Director General Emeritus of IAEA, Mohammad Al-Baradei, to talk about what kind of a role is India playing as a responsible nuclear power in terms of decarbonization of the global energy mix as well. Mr. Baradei, what do you make of this proposition that India has been a responsible nuclear power and is contributing as well to decarbonization of the world?
India clearly is a country that in huge need of renewable energy, in huge need of electricity, clean energy. Without energy, as we know, there is no development. You have been a pioneer in trying to use nuclear energy, and you have developed even your own reactors way back. But now, with what we know about climate change, we recognize that we need to use much more of nuclear energy because it's a clean source of energy. We help our member states in every aspect of these issues to make sure that they use nuclear energy in a responsible way, and we help them in technically, administratively, politically, to make sure that they maximize the use of nuclear energy and minimize the risk. And we have been working with India for many years. In the area of safety, security, and again in the last, since 2006 again, there is now, India has been allowed or got a waiver, that it can import, nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, or nuclear equipment and nuclear technology and raw material. So India is moving in the right direction. You have a very ambitious plan to expand the use of nuclear energy, and obviously the agency here, the National Atomic Energy Agency, and everybody who cares about India will support you in your endeavor. You have a huge development task. You have been doing very well in the last decade, but you still have a long road to go. And I want to emphasize, in practice, the way I see it, you are getting all what you want to get in terms of nuclear technology. There are those also who are in principle, like I think New Zealand, Austria, in fact, Ireland, who on principle saying this has to be, any country that part of the nuclear supply group has to be part of the NPT. So there's a lot of principles, a lot of politics, a lot of geopolitics, if you like. But at the end of the day, as I said, as a person who would like to see things deliver, I'm not sure that it has been an impediment so far.
Thank you for speaking to DD India. And that's Mohammed Al-Baradei saying that as far as the membership of India to the nuclear supply group is concerned, it's an interplay between principle and politics, and there's no impediment because of the waiver that India got in 2006 to this country playing an important role as far as decarbonization of the world is concerned using nuclear energy. With camera person Prabodh Negi, this is Gautam Roy in Vienna for DD India.
And before he lands in Austria, Prime Minister will be in Russia. So Ashok Sajjanhar, former Indian ambassador, is now joining us from Brussels to share his perspective on Prime Minister's upcoming visit to Russia. Ambassador, PM Modi and President Putin will meet for the 22nd annual summit 2.5 years after the 21st summit. But between these two summits, they met in Samarkand, and India participated in the Ukraine Peace Summit in Switzerland recently. When the two leaders meet in Moscow, Biden would also be welcoming at the same time NATO leaders in Washington, D.C. So besides discussing bilateral strategic ties, do you expect PM Modi to play the role of a peacemaker once again, much like what he had done in Samarkand when he famously said, "This is not the era of war"?
Well, thank you very much, Monmon. And you're very right. I think geopolitics, international relations, international issues, regional problems, they are definitely going to be a very important element of discussions between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin. It's going to be bilateral discussions, bilateral relations, of course, but it's not going to be limited to bilateral relations, because the two leaders and the two countries, they are very influential, they are very significant powers in the world. And I'm sure that notwithstanding the fact that on the 9th and 10th, there is going to be the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., but the whole world is going to be looking at what is happening in Moscow, because I think the world has also seen that when the two leaders met in Samarkand on the sidelines of the SCO summit in September 22. At that time, Prime Minister Modi had mentioned to President Putin that this is not an era of war, and the way forward is through dialogue and diplomacy. And you would remember, Monmon, that in November of that same year, 22, the decision in Bali on the G20, we were able to achieve only by using the formulation that Prime Minister Modi had used in Samarkand. So I'm sure the world is going to be looking at as to what Prime Minister Modi is going to tell Putin, that this war has now gone on for long enough. September 22 was just a few months after February 22. But now we are well into the third year of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So definitely the world is going to look at it, and I'm sure the Prime Minister is also going to be discussing as to the present status and how do we take it forward.
Also, Ambassador, this will be PM Modi's first visit to Russia since 2019. Now, bilaterally, it is a very robust strategic partnership in terms of defense, energy, trade, space, connectivity, etc. But trade deficit is a concern for India, and certain S-400 missile system deliveries have been delayed. Also, India is trying to rescue Indians who have been misled into joining the Russian army and servicing them. Do you expect all these issues to be addressed?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're going to be one front and center as far as discussions between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin are concerned. You know, trade definitely, because Indian rupees have been getting accumulated in India, and Russia has always been speaking about, whenever meetings have taken place between Mr. Lavrov and Dr. S. Jaishankar, as to how do we deal with the payment issue, because I think last year we saw that the bilateral trade had jumped to about $65–70 billion, out of which only about $4 billion or so is the export of India to Russia, and the rest is basically import of energy by India from the Russian Federation. So that is an issue that is going to be definitely front and center. And of course, we've heard in recent days that Russia might be thinking of investing these excess rupees that it has accumulated over the last 2 years in the Indian economy. And I think it's going to be definitely something that is going to be beneficial and profitable as far as Russia is concerned, because Indian stock market is one of the very well performing, if not exactly the best performing stock market, but it has been performing exceedingly well. So that is something definitely that is going to be discussed. And how to, the two countries have decided before the Russia-Ukraine conflict that the bilateral trade should be brought to $30 billion by 2025. But now we see, because of the changed circumstances, we have, heavily outstripped that particular target also. Then you mentioned about the S-400. Definitely, I think out of the 5 batteries, 2 batteries have been supplied to India. The rest has been delayed because of Russia's own preoccupation with the Ukraine conflict, and its focus has been much more on meeting its own demands as far as ammunition and equipment is concerned. So that definitely is also going to be a part of it. Of course, energy, as to how to make it, how to stabilize it, how to make it sustainable for the long term, because I think it is quite clear that before the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, India was buying only 1 to 2% of its oil requirements from Moscow. But now it has, Russia has emerged as the biggest supplier. It has outstripped even Saudi Arabia. It has outstripped Iraq and all the other suppliers from the Middle East to India. So how to make it sustainable, I think that is definitely going to be a part of it. And of course, there are a number of other issues. You would recall that when Prime Minister Modi had visited Vladivostok for the Far East Economic Summit in 2019, there were a number of new issues like the Chennai-Vladivostok's connectivity project,
yes,
like India's access to the Arctic region where both India and Russia could collaborate. So I'm sure all these issues are also going to be discussed.
Ambassador, Russia, China and North Korea are coming closer and closer and forming an Eastern alliance. Now, India's Ministry of External Affairs said in its curtain raiser briefing that challenges and opportunities in the Indo-Pacific may well be discussed too. So how do you see India navigating this challenge?
I think India will definitely try to tell Russia that whatever is, as the Prime Minister had mentioned, you would recall in the Shangri-La dialogue in 2017, that the Indo-Pacific concept is not directed against anyone. It is definitely not directed against Russia, because, the position it has taken, it seems to be that the Indo-Pacific concept it's a strategic concept. it is directed against China, and since China is a very close partner and friend of Russia, so it has also taken to opposing it. It has also used the same formulation that China uses against, for instance, the Quad, saying that it's an Asian NATO. We have made it very clear that it is not a military alliance, and in any case, India doesn't get into any military alliance, and it has no intention of making it into any sort of a military alliance. So I think definitely it is, India is going to tell Russia that it is not directed against any other country, definitely not against Russia in any way. And the Indo-Pacific is an idea, is a concept where both India and Russia can collaborate. As I mentioned, the Chennai-Vladivostok connectivity project is a very, could be a very important signal as far as the cooperation between India and Russia on the Indo-Pacific is concerned.
Okay.
And definitely what India is looking for is ensuring peace, security and stability in the Indo-Pacific, freedom of navigation, freedom of overflights, and freedom of the global commons in the region.
So a very vibrant development partnership to get stronger. Also, Russia will be hosting the BRICS summit. BRICS, of course, is an expanded grouping now. So will the summit be another opportunity, will this meeting between the two leaders to meet and take forward cooperation on, say, the new development bank, the contingency reserve arrangement, etc., in an expanded format where there are many more players today?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think the importance of BRICS is growing, and we've seen that the expansion last year from 5, we went on to 10 last year. The decision was taken. The 6th member that was decided to be added, Argentina, that decided not to join, but it's become a much more robust organization. And we know that there are about 20, 30 other countries waiting in the wings to become members. So when the BRICS summit takes place in Kazan in Russia in October of this year, I think this is going to be another opportunity for India to connect not only with the host, that is Russia, to take the relationship forward, bilateral relationship forward again, but also with the other partners, whether it is the leadership of Brazil, of South Africa, of Egypt, of UAE, of Saudi Arabia, all those, they are going to be there. They are all very strong partners of India. So taking the relationship forward with those countries, and of course some of the new countries who will also be inducted. We saw recently in SCO that there was mention made of the Kazakh interest in becoming a member of BRICS. Kazakhstan could very likely become a member. So there'll be other countries also. We know that some countries from Southeast Asia might also be inducted. So definitely this will be an opportunity for India to take forward its partnership and relationship with Russia in Kazan, but also with the other countries.
We'll leave it at that. Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar, such a pleasure to have you on DD India.
Thank you very much, Manman. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Let's move on now. Sri Lanka's President Ranil Wickremesinghe and India's High Commissioner to Colombo, Santosh Shah, handed over digital equipment to schools in the southern province of Sri Lanka during an event in Galle on Saturday. It was a part of a grant assistance project by the Indian government aimed at establishing 200 smart classrooms. A 5-member Indian delegation from the Department of Administrative Reforms and Public Grievances arrived in Colombo on a 3-day visit on Sunday. The delegation, led by Secretary and Director General of the National Centre for Good Governance, or NCGG, Mr. Srinivas, will engage in discussions on capacity building programs for Sri Lankan civil servants and the potential signing of a long-term memorandum of understanding for these initiatives. The agenda includes outlining a roadmap for future collaborations and exchanging insights on effective governance practices. During the visit, the delegation will call on Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardene as well as hold bilateral meetings with officials of the Presidential Secretariat and Prime Minister's office. The visit also includes an interactive session with NCGG alumni in Sri Lankan civil service. It is pertinent to mention here that the National Centre for Good Governance organized 3 capacity building or training programs for senior and mid-level officers of Sri Lanka, and to date, NCGG has trained a total of 95 civil servants from the island nation. Incessant rain has triggered floods, landslides, resulting in human and animal casualties and blocking movements on the roads in many areas of Nepal. Landslides in the mountains have caused road blockages, leading to inconvenience to travellers as well as locals. The Hanumante River in Bhaktapur and the Bagmati River in the southern region of Kathmandu has swollen massively. Since the arrival of monsoon in Nepal, death toll has risen to 70 till date, with 14 individuals losing lives in the past 2 days. With the 3D scanning technology, the same kind of component or model can be developed by the Central Institute of Petrochemicals Engineering and Technology, or CPET, in Chennai. This has been used to create and manufacture numerous crucial parts for ISRO, DRDO, Ford and Eureka. DD India's correspondent Ritesh Ranjan brings us a special report from Chennai.
Have witnessed the accomplishments of ISRO, DRDO and IGCAR. But we must also have missed the fact that numerous individuals and organizations are working to ensure the success of these initiatives. The Central Institute of Petrochemicals Engineering and Technology is one of them. The School of Advanced Research in Petrochemicals plays a significant role in producing minor parts for these organizations' projects. With the state-of-art infrastructure facilities, the center concentrates on advanced research and development activities in the automotive, aerospace, defense, agriculture and healthcare industries, among others. The primary goal of the center is to support new product development and startup in micro, small and medium-sized businesses by offering shared workspace, advising services and temporary access to vital tools, contacts and information. Since 2020, the center has provided technology, staff training, technology advancement and technology transfer assistance to over 500 MSMEs.
We do our focus areas on the new product development to the defense sectors and aerospace industries, and also for the MSMEs and MNCs like Ford and Mahindra and all automobile and aerospace organizations. The purpose behind is, if anybody is having a part which has been in the mind, they can come with the idea of the drawing or with the existing model that can be reverse engineered, and we can take the part into the 3D model, and that same can be produced on the 3D printing machine with appropriate materials.
Available technology of CPET can make making satellite easy and more cheaper in coming days. We have to see that. With camera person Raghavan, Ritesh Ranjan, DD India.
Rath Yatra of Puri, also known as the Festival of Chariots, is a significant cultural event celebrated in the Indian state of Odisha. It commemorates the journey of Lord Jagannath, Lord Balbhadra and Devi Subhadra from the Jagannath temple to the Gundicha temple in Puri. The Rath Yatra epitomizes India's rich cultural heritage, and the President of India, Draupadi Murmu, witnessed the festival where devotees from around the world gathered to pull the chariots and seek blessings.
The Rath Yatra of Lord Jagannath in Odisha's Puri is one of the grandest, most joyous and highly revered festivals in India. Each year, millions of devotees flock to Puri for the darshan of Lord Jagannath and to seize the chance to touch the Rath or help forward it, a gesture believed to earn great punya or spiritual merit. The Rath Yatra commemorates the journey of Lord Jagannath, Lord Balbhadra and Devi Subhadra from their abode in the Jagannath temple to the Gundicha temple, their aunt's temple. This year, the grand event commenced on Sunday and will continue for the next 9 days. India's President Draupadi Murmu witnessed the annual festival where hundreds of thousands of devotees from different parts of the world gathered to pull the chariots and to seek blessings of the deities.
This is very auspicious day for us because this is once in a lifetime chance to see Jagannath Rath Yatra. We came from America. It's an amazing experience. I have never seen this kind of crowd, and Rath Yatra is very auspicious.
I was trying to experience that transcendental feeling, and I'm waiting to see the cart moving in this grand road and experience Lord Jagannath coming towards us. And I wanted to get the blessings of Lord Jagannath and feel the transcendental pleasure.
The Rath Yatra involves a grand procession where the deities are taken in specially designed chariots from the Jagannath temple to the Gundecha temple. Besides Puri in Odisha, Lord Jagannath Rath Yatra was also taken out from the temple in Delhi's Horse Khas and at ISKCON temple, Gurugram. The Jagannath Rath Yatra in Gujarat's Ahmedabad began amid heavy security and high-tech surveillance. India's Home Minister Amit Shah participated in the Mangala Aarti at Jagannath Temple in Ahmedabad early on Sunday. Preparations for the Rath Yatra begin months in advance. Skilled artisans construct the 3 chariots anew each year from specific types of wood. The Rath Yatra is not just a religious procession, but a grand celebration that transcends social and cultural boundaries. With Bureau Inputs, Rabindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
In sports news, a young Indian team staged an emphatic comeback in the 5-match T20 series against Zimbabwe. Led by Abhishek Sharma's sensational century, India hammered Zimbabwe by 100 runs in the second T20 international match in Harare. With this win, India has levelled the 5-match T20 series 1-1. That's it then in this edition of DD India News Hour, but do share your thoughts with us on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on screen to download now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Anand Bhattacharya from all of us here in the Delhi newsroom. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.